President, please be seated. The court is back in session. Before giving the floor to the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia to put question to the expert witness, the chamber would like to ask a question to the defense team for Mr. Kyu Sompon. Do you wish to put questions to this expert witness based on the testimony of two witnesses whom Victor Kope requested to use their documents?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the opportunity to answer this question. Indeed, I had a few questions in mind regarding an aspect of the testimony of both of these people, but I thought that I wouldn't have to resort to an in-camera session because I was not going to be speaking about the duties each person held. So I had planned my questions with other ideas in mind. I was not considering an in-camera session. So this is what I must say. That's it. Regarding the topics that I am considering, and I did not think that it was necessary to resort to an in-camera session for that.
President, my purpose of asking that question is to allow the chamber to allocate an appropriate time so that party, particularly Kope, can put questions to the witness, to the expert witness in a camera session. The chamber just want to have the smooth proceeding, not to at one change to open and on another occasion move to closed session. And now the floor is given to the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia to resume the questioning. You may now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors and Counsel. I would like also to start with a request to the Chamber to consider giving limited additional time to us for questioning Mr. Osman. What we would have in mind, also in the light of earlier requests from the Kyu Sampan team, to not only question Mr. Osman tomorrow in the first session, but also in the second session, and then between us to divide the appropriate time, so that rather than finishing tomorrow after the first break, or before the first break, we would finish questioning Mr. Osman at lunchtime. For both.
Just to be clear, for both.
For both,
yeah.
Yes.
Peut-être pour compléter ce que vient de dire.
Maybe to complete what my colleague just said, I would like to remind you what the Kyu Sampan defense's position is since the start. Since the start, we indicated that the time that was considered by the chamber seemed a bit short to us, not because we want to bother people, but because with Mr. Osman, there are a certain number of documents that we have to read out, and that takes time. So I believe I said, I don't remember when, but in any case, I believe I said that 3 sessions for the Kyu Sampan defense team is really a bare minimum. So I would like to stand by this request because given the time that is allotted to us, we only have 2.5 sessions, and that is too short. So I'd like to stand by my original request. I think that in an email on 29 January, I repeated the fact that we were probably going to ask for extra time. Given that time has been reduced in the meantime, a day and a half and a day and a quarter as it is now, initially the chamber had scheduled each one of the parties or had scheduled a day and a half for the civil parties and for the prosecution, and then a day and a half for both defense teams. Then the chamber considered another schedule where there would be a half day given to the bench, which would reduce to a day and a quarter the cross-examination of the defense. And I indicated that that seems to be a bit problematic because we are going to have to cover several documents. So I would like to request again at least 3 sessions for the Queue Sans Pont defense team.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Osman. Before the lunch break, we were discussing maybe a delicate subject, sensitive subject. I asked you a question about those responsible within Sector 21 for the suppression of the rebellion that you so extensively described in your book, and which the prosecutors deem to be crimes against humanity. In your answer to my question, you said, and we wrote it down, and correct me if it's not an accurate description. You said, in my 2 books, I did not mention any name of a government official or that they led the forces to suppress and kill the Cham people. And then you said, I made mention of troops sent from Sector 21 to suppress the Cham people. If this is indeed what you said just before the lunch break, what is the reason that you didn't mention any names of people from Sector 21 or from the East Zone and who happen now to have high government positions, that they were responsible? What was the reason to not to do that?
Answer. Based on my interviews with most people, most of them did not make clear about names of any particular individuals. For this reason, I did not include specific names. Unless the witness told me their names, I would have included those people's names. Regarding the suppression of Cham people, I in fact have referred to the interviews that I have conducted with witness. I did not include anything beyond what the witness have said.
True, I accept that. However, in your book, there's quite a big chapter on the Sector 21 structure and the East Zone structure. That is information, I presume, you have partially from contemporaneous documents. I believe it's quite well known who was the Sector 21 chief and who was the second man. It's quite well known who was the chief of the military staff in the East Zone. It was quite well known who was the East Zone leader. You write extensively as to what happened, but it seems that you do not wish to write down in your book or give testimony today as to who are the principal, or who could be the principal perpetrators of these crimes against humanity. Is that Maybe because you are afraid to do so.
Answer: I do not have the fear to include that information, but my researchers have their limits. In researching more detailed information, there may have some particular individual who are now working in the government positions, and these people may have related to the activities during the Khmer Rouge time. So I have nothing to add besides what I have just said. Let me clarify one point. While I was working at the DC camp, I used to write a letter requesting to have interviews with some officials in the government. The reason of that letter is to try to find out more information, but at the time no response was communicated to me.
Just to be entirely sure, at one point in time during your testimony, we will be moving into a closed session. Would it be helpful to you if I were to request the trial chamber to close the doors and then ask these same questions?
Answer: I have my legal officer here assisting me in answering your question. President, you can consult with the legal officer, but you cannot ask your legal officer to give the response in replacement of yours. So the main issue is whether or not the question has something to do with the cases 03 and 04. So you can consult with her. Witness: my apology, Mr. President. I at first thought she has the right to give a response to question put by counsel. In relation to the question, particularly the killings of young people by officials in the government, I would like to object to answer the question.
I believe Madam Bardesh, the legal officer, is there to advise you if my questions in any way would relate to the investigation into cases 3 and 4. I'm not sure how you perceive my questions to have anything to do with cases 3 and 4. My point is the following. Let me explain again. We have touched a delicate and sensitive issue, and that is the question whether, let me formulate it neutrally, present government members are somehow involved in the crimes against humanity alleged against the two accused in September 1975, October 1975. We all agree that you are an expert on the events. And my question was only, would it assist you, would it help you if I were to ask the chamber to close the doors and then ask the question again?
Answer. I would like not to answer your question, particularly in relation to individual who used to be working in Sector 21, whether in closed or open sessions. My apology, I cannot expand further on this particular issue besides what I have just said.
I understand, but Mr. President, I understand the role of the expert to be that if the question is beyond the expertise, then obviously Mr. Osman is under no obligation to answer such a question. But if it is well within his expertise and even well within the exact parameters of his book and investigation, I believe he is under the obligation to answer. And I only try to assist the expert by offering him to request you to close the doors. But I don't believe he is allowed to say, I don't want to answer this question. Of course, as long as it doesn't impede on cases 3 and 4, which I believe it doesn't. Because I don't believe those people that we discussed are subjects of the investigation.
President. The Chamber is opinion that the expert witness should answer the relevant questions put to you in relation to your expertise. And if the questions are related to your field of expertise and your knowledge and experience, you should answer the questions. And you can say, I do not know, to the question that put to you. By saying, I do not know, it's also a form of question. So the Chamber cannot force you to give the responses to any question beyond your realm of expertise and knowledge. Do you understand, Mr. Expert Witness? So again, if you have the basis and if it is within your field of expertise, you should answer the questions. You are here as an expert witness, not a simple witness. For simple witnesses, they should answer what they have known. Then they cannot answer the assumption or what they did not know. So now you can resume your questioning, Council Copper.
Thank you, Mr. President. My last question was just intended to assist you and asking you if you would be more comfortable if I asked the trial chamber for a closed session. So if you say that doesn't matter, then I will just ask the question again to you, and then hopefully you'll be able to answer. So would you be more comfortable if I move this subject to the closed session that we will be having, I don't know, sometime probably tomorrow?
May I just add something here, because while she is not allowed to give legal assistance to this subject, the Chamber obviously can explain. If you ask for a closed session, there are there are preconditions for that. So you would have to allege that you feel threatened if you answer the question in open session, you or your family. I'm handing back to Council.
I don't see any reaction on your part, Mr. Osman. Let me try again, and let me see if I can put the question in a broader context, and then see if you are willing to answer. You have been testifying at length about the Cham Rebellion in '75 in Svay Kleng, Tree Village, Kopal. As I said, you have written an entire book on this subject. According to your own interview with Mat Lee, only 20 to 30% of thousands of families in Kopal survived. I'm not sure if Mat Lee is correct, but that's what he said. In your book, you're writing extensively about Sector 21 structure and the East Zone structure. Those three villages are within Sector 21. Your mentor was indeed, you said, expert Steve Hedder, whom we believe is the author of that Human Rights Watch report that I'm not at liberty to discuss with you. I'm putting it to you that Sector 21 and or the East Zone forces were solely responsible for the brutal suppression of this rebellion. And I'm furthermore putting it to you that, among others, Mr. Uk Boon Chun, the number 2 of Sector 21 in 1975, Heng Samrin, the chief of the East Zone military staff, Sao Pim, the East Zone leader, and Hun Sen Regiment 55 commander in 75, that they were all responsible for these crimes against humanity. My question is, please give your expert opinion to these propositions, and please indicate if you agree that they were among the main perpetrators of these crimes against humanity.
Observation. It's a very long introduction to the question where counsel makes various assertions, one of which is that the book the witness wrote extensively discusses Sector 21, and I don't recall that being discussed, the structure of Sector 21, the Sector 21 military in the book. I think there's a list of who was the district secretaries for Kroch Chamar, but not for the sector structure.
The same question.
Defense counsel, please hold on. Deputy Co-Prosecutor, Mr. President, I noticed that the defense counsel mentioned that some government officials, and that they allege of committing a crime against humanity, and I'd like to have the source for that reference.
Well, I'm not sure how to react to that one. Mr. President, I will adjust my question as to what you describe in your book as District Crouchmar in Sector 21, but the question remains the same. I'm putting this proposition to you that at least those 4 people mentioned can be considered the main perpetrators of these crimes against humanity in Crouchmar district. What is your expert opinion on that proposition?
What I stated in the book was based on the available documents as well as the accounts of people that I interviewed. And as I stated, none of the people that I interviewed expressly mentioned any of those names. They made an indirect reference to those people that they were part of the leadership in Sector 21. However, they did not mention that the 4 individuals, including Hein Samrin and Hun San, that they were implicated in the killing of the Cham people. And the 4 individuals that you mentioned, they are survivors and they are living now. And if you wish to get clarification on that, you should put such a submission to the chamber so the chamber can call them for clarification.
Well, that is my favorite hobby, asking that witness to be summoned, Mr. Osman. But I will move on because I don't expect an answer. As a matter of fact, if I were you, I wouldn't answer that question either. But let me move to Ogbun Chun.
Can I just make an objection to speeches rather than questions during the examination of a witness? I mean, I think it counts as using up his own time by making speeches as opposed to just asking the witness the questions he believes are relevant.
I will withdraw from speeches.
And Mr. Expert, you are reminded to respond only to the limit of your expertise, and you do not need to mention or interfere with the authority or the discretion of the chamber. For example, on the summoning any witnesses, you should respond to the limit of your knowledge and expertise, And if you don't know the response to that question or fact or event, you just simply say no. And you don't need to make any descriptive response, otherwise you would put yourself in a hot seat.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Osman, I will move on and now turn to the subject of who might have been behind the 75 rebellion that we have been discussing. Let me turn to an interview that Uk Boon Chun had with your mentor, Steve Hedder, document E3/387. English ERN 00350206, French 00441418.
Council, please repeat the document number and the ERN again, and do it slowly this time since the 3 working languages are used in this code.
I apologize, Mr. President. It's document E3/387, Khmer ERN 00379487, English 00350206, French 00441418 and 19. As I said, it's an interview from Steve Hedder with Uk Boon Chun, the number 2 of the sector, and he is saying the following about the rebellion. He's talking about 2 movements. He says the first movement was of Cham Muslims along the Mekong River, Krochmar district, Tabang Kumum district in sector 22. He means 21, which included certain districts in the provinces of Preving, Kampong Cham and Kandal. And he says the movement intended to create state within a state because the Cham Muslims wished to occupy Cambodian territory on the eastern bank of the Mekong River to central Annam to create a state. This was according to their confessions, and they had an organization, Furo Champa, under the leadership of Sabun Beskazen. I will address the question of confessions because I know that's the prosecution's objection. Let me first ask you, do you know this document?
Your Honor, I would like to have my objection heard before counsel proceeds. He's just read out something that he acknowledges comes from a confession. My understanding of your ruling is that he's not allowed to do that. He's read it out and now he's putting it to the witness that the results of what came from confessions, we believe from torture, and now trying to say that that's the evidence that he's relying upon to put before the expert witness. I think your prior rulings are that it's against the dignity of the court to put evidence that was derived by torture in front of the court or in front of a witness.
As a matter of fact, I reread, because of yesterday's event, your decision. And if I understand your decision correctly, we need to establish if the confessions that someone might be referring to are indeed coming from institutions of which we believe there might be a real risk that torture was committed. I agree if that were to be S21, but I'm trying to find out whether Uk Boon Chun was in fact, when he was giving this interview, relying not on confessions of S21, but rather on confessions of Crouchmar Security Center, of which we have no knowledge whatsoever that people were there tortured. So if the expert can answer this question and maybe shed light on the use of confessions, and if they were indeed maybe from Crouchmar Security Center, which would make sense, then we have a different situation.
Could I suggest that we ask counsel what his question is? Because I do object to him reading what he read, but I think the next step is what is his question?
I have no problem in asking my question, because I would like to confront Mr. Osman with something he said when answering a question from Judge Lavergne at the transcript of 10 February 2016 at 15:43, and the question of Judge Lavergne was to the extent that the objective of the FULRO was to create a Cham state and to support the Champa. If I understood you correctly, could the Khmer Rouge not have seen in such plans something that could eventually pose a threat to the democratic Kampuchea regime? Or according to them, it was in their interest insofar as such a force risked turning increasingly against Vietnam as opposed to Cambodia? That's the question of Judge Lavergne. And then the answer of Mr. Osman is, the history of the FULRO movement never wanted to capture Cambodian territory and created the Champa state. The FULRO movement itself was supported by the Cambodian government, by the Cambodian people. There was only one goal for the FULRO movement, that was to regain back the territory of Champa, and there was only one important goal. Now, he is saying something which seems to be at odds with what Uk Boon Chun is saying, whether he is relying on confessions or not. So that's the actual ultimate goal of my question.
Thank you. And if I could just be heard on the issue of whether the burden to establish whether something is from torture or is not. I understand the ruling of the court to be that the burden is on the party proposing to use that evidence to show, when there is a risk, that the evidence was not obtained by torture. Counsel just said he has no information about Kroch Chamar, and again, he's just speculating that maybe this evidence came from Kroch Chamar Security Center. Our view is that the evidence has shown throughout DK that torture was regularly used in the security centers. The counsel's basically, in our view, admitted he cannot meet the burden of proof to show that the documents did not come from torture. Furthermore, we know that Cham were taken to S-21 and tortured. That's part of the expert's book. So we don't think the defense has met or can meet the burden of showing that the information did not come from torture. Our view is it clearly did.
And why is it, Mr. President, that we cannot meet this burden? Because I think 6 times already we've asked for Mr. Uk Boon Chun to be summoned to testify so that we could ask the question to himself. Then we will know what the confessions were that he was referring to. Now we still don't know, and now we are being accused of not meeting our burden. That's a little bit of an odd remark. But anyway, I think I'm allowed to ask the questions.
If I remember correctly, when it comes to the burden of proof, the first step is a real risk assessment to be done by the trial chamber. And then we get into the next steps. So this is the first thing to be done.
Correct, but you have deleted from the scope Crouchmar Security Center, so there's no information for us there. I'm not allowed to question Uk Boon Chun, so my hands are tied, and I'm asking Mr. Osman whether he knows the confessions could be coming from Crouchmar. It would be speculation, I agree, but still.
Council, to avoid confusion, could you please represent or reread the part which says that this is based on confessions? Or redirect us again to the part of the document where it said that this is based on confessions.
That's in Uk Boon Chun's interview with Heather. He's been asked questions about the rebellion, and then he offers information on Furo, says that the movement intended to create a state within the state, and then there's a sentence, this was according to their confessions.
Thank you.
And international political lawyer, you should have taken the stance before the bench deliberates the matter. Usually you are on the prosecution side, and you should take stand after the co-prosecutor. And I believe everyone is here or has been here for many years, so you should know the practice. Anyway, we will allow you this time, but in the future, do not do it that. Do that again.
Je vous remercie, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've taken due note of your remarks, and I will prepare myself accordingly. I read your decision, and I noticed that if I had read it properly, the Chamber had already assessed the prima facie risk, considering that all security centers, including S21, presented a risk. So we are not only talking of S21, but all the security centers. That is what I read in your decision. In any case, I wanted to point this out before you go into your deliberations.
My understanding is that Council's objective is to show that these confessions were coming from a situation where no torture was applied.
Yeah, and if I understand your decisions earlier correctly, there is no such real risk situation when it comes to Crouchmar Security Center. I'm not sure because I don't have the evidence or the decision in front of me, but there seems to be a list of security center where this is presupposed, but that Crouchmar Security Center is not one of them. I don't know if that's correct. That's what I'm being told here, but
Judge Lavange, you have the floor.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, I do not have the decision with me here. Can Council Giro give us the references of that decision? But if I remember correctly, I believe this chamber said that all the security centers were listed in the closing order and that they should be considered in like manner. Counsel for the civil parties. Mr. President, and the judges, is decision E350/8, and in English.
Confessions from S21 and other security centers to carry a real risk that they were obtained by torture. Donc il semble clair à la lecture.
So, upon reading your decision, it appears to be clear that all the security centers are covered by the prima facie assessment that you made in your decision.
Et le paragraphe.
And Mrs. Giro, what is the paragraph? What is the paragraph of that decision?
79. Let me read to you, and if I'm allowed to sit to read better, what I believe your decision is. Trial Chamber refers explicitly to paragraphs 14.8 and 14.11 of the closing order, Those are the security mentioned in that allegedly used torture, and the security centers which fall into that category are Koh Yang, Koh Kdok, Krang Tachan, the North Zone Security Center, Phnom Krol, Predram Resrot, S21, Sang, and Wat Tlork. So no Crouchmar District Security Center.
President, I'd like to hand the floor to Judge Lavenge to make an oral ruling on this matter so that we can proceed with hearing the testimony of the expert. Judge Lavenge, you may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The Chamber considers that the practice of torture is, on first sight, a practice that was generalized and applied in all security centers in Democratic Cambodia, including, therefore, Krochma. And therefore, the Chamber considers that if the foundation of the question involves information obtained in confessions coming from Krochma, there is a presumption that these confessions were obtained under torture, and therefore it's up to the defense to convince us of the contrary. So if the aim of the question to the expert is to question him on the fact whether or not torture was practiced at Krochma, fine. However, if in that case the question would be allowed. However, if the point is to put questions to him using information that is liable to have been obtained under torture, in that case the question will not be authorized.
I really do not understand this decision. The Krochma is not on the scope of this trial, so we cannot find out. It's not mentioned in the closing order as a place where torture was committed. We cannot ask Uk Bun Chun because he's not coming. Maybe you, Mr. Osman, maybe do you know anything about Krochma Security Center?
Answer, yes.
What is it that you know about Krochma Security Center? Were people sent there after the rebellion?
Answer. In relation to the rebellion at Kohpal, those who were involved in that rebellion were not sent to the security center. Differently, those who rebelled at Svai Klang were sent to that center. The location of the center was so small, so it could not accommodate hundreds of those who were involved in the movement. They were instead sent to be detained at schools and the pagodas.
Before I go into the details of Krochma Security Center and those schools, do you know whether people who were involved in rebellion and who subsequently had been arrested gave statements or confessions which were then subsequently sent to Uk Bun Chun?
Answer. Frankly speaking, I have never received even a page of confessions which came from the security center of Krochma.
Because of time, I will move on. Mr. Osman, my question was about Fulro. Do you know whether the organization Fulro or whether General Les Kosem, whom you also discussed a few weeks ago, whether they were involved somehow in the 1975 rebellion?
Answer. I have heard the word or name Furo before I became a researcher at DC camp. I have heard that name from my relatives and parents, Furo was a movement group to liberate Champa from another country. The Furo, in fact, had a clear intention. It did not intend to create a state within Cambodia, and that state would become the country of Cham. Furo did not support only Cham people, but also the previous government. The government existed before 1970. There were two purposes. The Furo, one Furo intended to liberate Champa from another country, and another Furo intended to liberate another land at the lower part of Cambodia.
Let's move away a little bit from the intentions of Furo, whether that was to create a state within Cambodia or not. Do you know if Furo and General Les Kosem were closely connected to American special forces, American foreign policy within Indochina?
Answer: Les Kosem was an elite or a dignitary recognized in Sangkum Resniyum, and later on he was a leading general in Lon Nol's time. Les Kosem was ethnically Cham. He was well known by the public, and those who were born a long time ago also know the name Les Kosem. Les Kosem was part of Furo movement as well, and there was another ethnic Jarai, Imbaram Inyul. He was one of the leaders as well in Furo.
We have provided you with documents in relation to General Les Kosem and Furo. More particularly, we have provided you with a cable from U.S. Secretary of States to various U.S. embassies, October 73. It is E3/9689. And it's a cable from Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. And we believe that the document shows the close cooperation between Brigadier General Lol Non, and Kissinger reports the conversation he had with Lon Non, and Kissinger reports having spoken about Lol Non and Les Kosem's activities with Furo, as well as several aspects of the Cham question. Do you know anything about the active involvement or the secret active involvement of U.S. government with Furo and General Les Kosem's activities? And do you know whether that subsequently had anything to do with the rebellion in '75?
Answer: in relation to Furo's movement, frankly speaking, I did not go deep into the research about the structure, political aspects, and in-depth tasks of that movement. I am only aware that the purpose of Furo was to liberate Champa and the lower part of Cambodia, or Cambodia Crown.
I understand it, but I'm just trying to see if I can get any information from you as to why Sector 21 forces used so much military power to suppress the rebellion. There is testimony in your book about Cham having 1 or 2 guns and having sticks, etc. But Sector 21 troops used real big military force to suppress the rebellion. So hence my questions, whether you know if former troops of General Lescosem had anything to do with that rebellion.
Answer. I have not done a research in relation to the rebellion in the 3 villages, particularly the relation of those 3 villages with Lescosem. I have never done such researches.
Very well, no problem. I'll move on. Move on to another aspect of rebellion. Rebellion more into 76, 77, and that is the rebellion organized by something called the White Khmer. You were asked a few questions about that a few weeks ago. But is my understanding correct that also into the existence and activities of the White Khmer you have done only limited research?
But that is true.
And are you able to explain as to the reasons why? Because there seem to be quite a substantial number of Cham people who are talking about, in one form or another, about Cham being involved in the White Khmer. For instance, we have sent you 21 civil party applications in total. All these people, all Cham, mention Cham involvement in the White Khmer. We had a witness here, No Satas, who talked about White Khmer rebellion in 75 and 77. What's the reason that you didn't go any further with your research into that matter?
And just to be fair to the witness, and especially to No Satas, her testimony was that her father was killed with the accusation that he was White Khmer. She never said he was White Khmer.
I don't think that is the situation, but let me withdraw No Satas. Question again, there seems to be a lot of discussion with civil parties and other Cham of Cham involvement in the White Khmer rebellion movement. What is the reason that you didn't go any further into that topic?
President, please hold on. Mr. Expert witness, you have the floor now, international lead co-lawyer for civil parties.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Regarding the 21 civil parties mentioned by my colleague, none of the documents referring to these civil parties has been admitted. And when we read over these documents, only one of them makes a clear connection between the Cham and the Khmer Sol, the White Khmer. So when our colleague, therefore, generalizes and says that 21 civil parties make a connection between the Cham and the White Khmer, well, that seems to me inaccurate, and I simply wanted this to be clear on the record. Thank you.
21 more or less. The number isn't really important, Mr. Osman.
But Counsel, generally for the record, do you really think when we write a verdict and come across this part where it says 21 without giving any references, that any of us will bother to check what you sent to him? If you really want us to take this serious, please give us the references.
I'm happy to give those references, but I'm also mindful of the time. We have sent 21 civil party applications with all document numbers. I'm very happy to do that again. Goes away from my time. Surely we will mention them in our closing brief. So for that reason, you have to take them into consideration. But let me rephrase my question. Otherwise, we don't get anywhere, Mr. Osman. What's the reason that you didn't do any research into charm involvement in the White Khmer?
Answer. I am of the opinion that it is not useful in relation to the deaths of Cham people in connection with Khmer Saw or White Khmer. Actually, in fact, Khmer Rouge said that Cham people were killed because they were under accusation that they were Khmer Saw or White Khmer. Some Cham people were victims of that accusation. Some others were accused of being CIA and KGB agent or Vietnamese agents. So the same applies to those who were victims of that accusation. I did not need to do the research on that particular issue. So the same as a KGB, CIA, and Vietnamese agents. That was the pretext to kill Cham people. President, it is now time for a short break. The chamber will take a short break from now until 3:05. Court officer, please assist the expert witness during the break time, and please invite him together with the legal officer from the OCIJ back to the witness stand at 3:05. The court is now in recess.